Have you ever been so fascinated by an idea that you don't give up trying to make it work for over a year? Well, welcome to Craftmas this year. It is Craftmas Day 1. For those of you who are wondering what that is, I do 12 days of Craftmas leading up to the day when I celebrate Christmas on the 24th of December. Today, we are going to be starting our journey of turning these flax seeds into some sort of usable linen textile. Do I have a green thumb? Quite the opposite. I do not. Do I know how to spin? No. Have I ever worked with flax before? Also no. So this is going to be quite the learning journey. We have to go back over a year ago to September of 2022 when I first started working on this idea by building the planter boxes on the patio where we live so that I could start planting the flax seeds. Throughout this process, I consulted many different sources to figure out at least a little bit of what I'm doing, including a lot of videos, and also these wonderful books on growing linen. I'll give you a really quick summary. This is the hands down most comprehensive guide. This has it all, kind of expensive. These two contain the relevant points from the previous book, not in as much detail. This one is the one that actually made me start this process because it's funny, fun, down to earth, and makes me feel like I can make mistakes and everything will still turn out okay. This is not just flax, but also cotton. And on top of all of that, why I really enjoy this book is because it has schematics to make flax processing equipment at the end, which you'll see a little bit later in this video. At this point, I needed to pick out exactly what flax seeds I was going to plant in my bed. There were many different varieties mentioned. You can pick flax that's meant for seed production, for cloth production, and I was a little bit overwhelmed. But then Raven Ranson mentioned something called a landrace, which is a genetically diverse, locally adapted population. So the idea is that you cultivate a particular flax variety from many different seeds that works best in your particular growing environment and with your particular gardening style. So for me, I have a lovingly neglectful style of gardening, unfortunately. I needed to find a variety of flax that would work on my small patio space that doesn't have the most ideal light and works with my less than attentive gardening style. So I bought a whole different bunch of flax seeds, textile specific ones, flax seeds that I can get in the grocery store, just all different kinds. I mixed them all together and that was what I decided to plant in my planting beds. With this seed mixture picked out, I decided to scatter them into my seed beds, very densely packed together. Fun little extra tidbit, this is kind of a broadcasting method of the seeds because you are broadly casting them, and that's where the modern term broadcasting, like networks and things, come from this method of seed planting. You want to plant them nice and tight together so that you encourage them to grow as straight and with as minimal branching as possible because your linen comes from the stems of the plant. So you plant them close together so they try to grow up as tall as they can to search the light. For reference though, for you or for me in the future, this is probably way too tightly planted together. Oh, and also because I had quite a few planter beds, I decided to grow some dye plants as well. Coreopsis for a golden yellow, weld for a bright yellow, and madder for a deep red. I get indigo in the wild in Utah from a noxious weed that grows there that you are encouraged to pick. I'm hoping to get the primary colors from my natural grown dye beds. All of this went into the ground in October 1st. Is this kind of late in the season? Yes. However, I live in California. The first frost date is the end of December and the last frost date is the beginning of January. So we barely have any frost here, and typically it takes 90 to 100 days from when you plant it to when you can harvest linen. So I was hoping that I would be able to harvest my linen if I put it in the ground October 1st, sometime around the New Year holiday time, something like that. On October 7th, I woke up incredibly excited because we had all the plants sprouting. I hadn't noticed anything growing before this, and then all of a sudden on the 7th, I woke up and I saw all of these flax seeds pushing through the ground. I had an inkling though that I had planted them too densely when I scattered the seeds. I think you can tell that I definitely planted them way too close together, but I didn't want to thin them in case something went wrong. I didn't want to prune them out, so I decided to just continue to let them grow as they were. Almost 2 weeks later, on October 13th, I filmed another little update. The plants were growing strong, they were growing upright. It's October 13th and our flax is doing incredibly well. I love how everything's looking in these two beds. I'm a little bit worried about the flax in this one because it's all leaning a little bit to the left towards where the sunshine comes in from, and I'm worried that when the flax gets a little bit taller, it might topple. So far, I mean, I did obviously unevenly distribute the seeds. You can see there's some bald patches, but I'm super happy with it. And there are also some really tiny second set of leaves coming in, and those are looking fantastic. We are back for a 3-week after planting update. It is October 21st. I did an update on Patreon where I called what's happening bolting, and it's not bolting. It is called lodging. And unfortunately, my plants are falling over, which means that I'm not really gonna get any flax to linen production from those. They're growing too tall without enough support, and then I accidentally watered them from above when any watering that I'm doing should really happen from below, because they can't support themselves when they get the extra weight of the water on top of their leaves. The other thing is there's not enough light on the top of them, especially on my second lower bed, and that's causing them to grow too tall without enough support in their stems. So I have got myself some grow lights to help the light that's on my flax seeds and then also the direction of the light. Let me actually also maybe grab a measuring stick so you can see how tall each of the flax plants have been growing in each of the beds. We're at 3 weeks, and I think 60 days after planting, typically you get the flowers. All right, so that's a 3-week update. We'll see you again really soon. So it is now 25 days since I first planted all of my seeds, and we have had a really bad windstorm the last few days. So unfortunately it has taken a few of my plants. So the flax, especially in the lower bed, I think that one wasn't doing quite as well, and we have a lot of lodging there and some lodging in the taller bed. After the windstorm, it's a little sad. It took out quite a bit of my flax. But it's a learning process. I think every time that I do this, I'll be getting better. I honestly didn't even think that any of my seeds would sprout, much less that all of my seeds have sprouted. We'll see if I can keep them alive until harvest. It is October 31st today, and I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the plants. We have been having a lot colder days. As you can probably tell, I'm a little bit bundled up. The last few days, the temperatures have dropped to like the 50-degree Fahrenheit range as the highs, but we aren't getting below freezing at any point yet. The flax is probably not looking its best, but we still have some that's alive and still growing, I believe. Today is November 6th, so I guess it's been 37 days since I planted all of my seedlings. And well, We've had some slight catastrophes, I think, with the flax. Because they fell over, it let me see in the root system of the flax, and I think there's mold growing. Something that I love about having created a bit of a community is that I asked on my Patreon for advice on what to do, because I don't really know where even to start, and I got wonderful answers, really helpful answers. So thank you so much to everyone who responded. And also, of course, I have a very good resource in my mom, who is partially along her way to get a PhD in horticulture. So I was able to kind of phone in some help. And she says that it would probably be a good idea for me to remove the affected dead plants at least. And then I have a 10% solution of baking soda and water, and I can spray that all over the soil, and that should act as a bit of a fungicide. But she says that I need to be careful to not cross-contaminate between my beds. I'll be wearing gloves, and I'm going to be using different gardening tools for each set of beds. I'm going to try that and see if it saves my flax plants. I'll get my gloves on and my tools out, and let's hopefully fix some of this. Usually around the end of the year, we travel to my parents' house in Utah. I knew when these flax seeds went into the ground, I was pushing it in terms of weather conditions and whether or not I would even be around for the harvest. But I was so excited. I just wanted to get started on this idea rather than waiting until the springtime to plant. However, by the time that we had left, we still haven't even had the first blossoms on the flax themselves. But it had been almost 90 days of my plants growing, so a full 30 days after the blossoms should have shown up, and I had nothing. No blooms on my plants. We came back from visiting my parents in the new year, still nothing had happened, no blooms on the plants. By the time we were getting into February now, I just gave up. And I was honestly so sad about it that I didn't do anything with the plants until I felt like emotionally ready to rip out all of the work that we had done. But as luck would have it, my laziness paid off a little bit. Today is the spring equinox. It's March 20th, so I thought it would be the perfect day to take a look at our little patio garden outside. Before we take a look, I think it's been such a long time since I last updated you, mainly because I had kind of given up on the flax. It is now 3 months later, when nothing happened in the months in between, and I even waited a month after that, I kind of gave up. And then this morning, on the spring equinox, I went outside to check on my plants, and let me show you what I found. As I mentioned before, usually it's about 30 days from the full flush of blooms on your flax plants to harvesting the flax for linen production. However, by that time, my plants were still very, very green, and the other indicator was that half of your plants had turned yellow from the roots up. So I waited another month for that. So on May 22nd, I finally harvested my first crop of flax plants. Although there was a marked difference between the ones that I harvested in the upper bed versus the ones that I harvested in the lower bed, and I hung them up to dry. I don't know if you know anything about processing flax to linen, but it is not a straightforward process. And I had gone through so much with my homegrown flax that I was worried about messing it up at this point. And as luck would have it, when I was visiting my parents over the summer, we found wild growing flax on one of our hikes. And it was at the perfect point for harvest, maybe a little bit too late, but that meant that Luckily, the seeds were a little bit more matured, and we harvested that flax, and I decided that that was what I was going to use to practice processing flax into linen before processing my very precious batch of homegrown flax. In order to turn your flax into usable linen for spinning, you first have to remove the seeds from the seed bowls, you have to ret, then you have to break, scutch, and hackle. So step one was removing the seeds from the flax. And with a wild growing flax, I decided to try to do the seed harvesting in as contained a fashion as possible because I wanted to keep these seeds to potentially plant a new crop myself. So I put them in between sheets of tissue paper, and I used a rolling pin to basically smash the heck out of my flax. And as you'll see, a lot of flax processing just involves smashing the flax in different ways. We broke open those seed balls. We had a lot of the extra bits in there as well, so we spent time winnowing it and sieving it, going through it with our hands, and we ended up with a little collection of seeds that I will save for the springtime when it is a little bit more ideal to plant that flax outside. Then it's time to ret your flax, and if retting sounds kind of like rotting, it's because basically you are rotting your flax. The usable fibers are on the outside of the stems, and then the inside is boon, which you want to remove, and the outside line fibers, which are the really long fibers that run from the roots all the way to the tips of the plants that you want to harvest, are also glued together. So you want to start the rotting process in order to break down and dissolve that glue that's holding the fibers together. It is a delicate balance though. If you don't ret it long enough, then the glue is too sticky and you won't be able to remove the boon. If you ret it for too long, you not only break down the glue that sticks the fibers together, but you break down the fibers themselves. This part of the process was very scary to me because I didn't want to either over or under process my flax. I am on day 5 of the ret of the wild flax, and at this point it's, I think, more than time to check our retting process. It does say to take out like 1 or 2 and let them dry fully. Maybe let's take out a small handful of them, let them dry fully, and test the ret. Okay, these are the 2 that I've picked out. I'm going to stand them up in the sun to dry, and let's hope that that dries out by the end of today when I'm just leaving it in the sun all day, and we can check the ret and see if we need to make some changes. Okay, so these are fully dry. From what I saw, you're supposed to just break it and then see if the fibers come loose easily from the rest. Mine's ripping, which is not a good sign, but it's also coming off in strips. So apparently if it rips, it's over-retted. If it comes off in strips, it's under-retted. So right now, kind of feels like it's both. The other thing is this feels very bendy and not, it's supposed to snap. And this is more bending than snapping. I don't think it's ready. Okay, I'm gonna add some hot water and I'm gonna put it in a warmer room for the next few nights, and then I will recheck it a few days from now. Okay, so I have been letting the flax dry in the sun. Can you see that? I think these strands are the flax, like the linen fibers that we're looking for. When we break it and go like this, you should see everything snapping off, and then we're left with these long lines of things. And I believe that right there is basically the linen. These are the linen fibers, I'm pretty sure. So with what I hoped was a good enough ret on the wild flax, I decided to move on to the next steps: breaking, scutching, and hackling. These are all steps basically that are just violently beating at your flax in order to remove the boon and bits that are not the linen fibers. So a break is when you are literally breaking your flax in this big wooden bit and chomping away at it. It's like teeth. The second step is scutching, which is using a scutching sword to kind of beat at the flax, another way to remove the rest of your boon. And then the hackling bit is where you can also remove a little bit of the boon, but you're combing out. There are short linen fibers, which is called tow, and then there are the long fibers that go, like I said, all the way from the root to the tip, and those are the long line fibers, which are usually the finest and create the best quality linen. But in order to do all of those steps, I I needed some equipment. I don't have a brake, I don't have hackles, and I needed to first build my brake and my hackle. And this wonderful book by Cindy Connor had exact schematics and details on how I could build that, as well as a list of things that I could go to my local home improvement store to buy and build myself a flax brake and a hackle. With my brake built, it was time to put it to use. It's always fun to learn how to use a new piece of equipment, but a little nerve-wracking. I went ahead and basically chopped at the flax to break apart the boon into smaller pieces so that it would hopefully kind of burst out and break away from my linen fibers. The scutching, like I said, was a little bit lower tech. I didn't build anything specific for this. There are scutching swords that you can get, but I just used some leftover wood from building my brake and the side of my planter box to scutch away at that boon that I had broken up. So the brake broke apart the boon, and the scutching sword helps kind of remove that boon. I was starting to get worried at this point that I didn't have a ton of fiber and I had under-redded because it was really hard to get the boon out. I was having to work my linen quite a bit harder, which made it seem like my fibers were breaking easier. So something to keep in mind for when I process the flax that I grew myself. The next bit was hackling, and this is supposed to remove the shorter linen fibers, which are called toe fibers, from the long line fibers. And you typically have at least 3 different fineness grades, from coarse to medium to fine, of these hackles, which are basically big combs to comb your flax through. I only created the coarse one because I wanted to get a handle on how this worked, and if I wanted to process flax a little bit more, I was going to create the more fine grades for my homegrown one. I just wanted to try out the techniques at this point, and it's also very loud to hammer nails into a board in an apartment complex. The hackling worked well, but it didn't remove all of the bits of boon that were still stuck in it. So I actually used my dog's brush as a finer toothed hackle to comb through the rest of the fiber, and then I did the last bit by hand to really remove the last bits of the boon from my fibers, which was a very labor-intensive process. After all of this time and work, I had now successfully separated wild-grown Utah flax into the line fibers and a few different grades of toe fibers. And I'm hoping to be able to actually spin that into linen. Now that I had done this process once with wild-grown flax, I felt at least a little bit more confident on doing it on my own grown flax. So I started the retting process, which we will see finished and processed next time. I'm hoping to also get to learning how to spin flax on my spinning wheel. Thank you so much for joining me for Craftmas Day 1. I will see you again in 2 days for Craftmas Day 2. I hope you enjoyed watching me learn how to grow flax and process that, and that you'll join me next time by subscribing, because then we are going to learn how to turn this flax into linen fibers that we can hopefully use in a textile. And once again, thank you so much to Brooklinen for sponsoring this video. Be sure to check out the link in the description below and enter the promo code at checkout for 15% off. I'll see you next time. Bye.